All right, let's go to the White House now, where Democrats and Republicans just met with President Donald Trump. Lawmakers are just speaking just moments ago. I believe we have Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. Let's listen in.
Okay, well, we met with the president for the first time since all of these issues started, even though we have requested repeated meetings with Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson, and the president. We have very large differences on health care and on their ability to undo whatever budget we agree to through rescissions and through impoundment, as well as pocket rescissions. And I think for the first time, the president heard our objections and heard why we needed a bipartisan bill. Their bill has not one iota of Democratic input. That is never how we've done this before. When I was leader, we negotiated 4 times with Republicans, and we never had a shutdown. And so it's up to the Republicans whether they want to shut down or not. We've made to the president some proposals. Our Republican leaders will have to talk to them about them, but ultimately he's the decision maker. And if he will accept some of the things we asked, which we think the American people are for, on health care and on rescissions, he can avoid a shutdown. But there are still large differences between us.
There was a frank and direct discussion with the President of the United States and Republican leaders, but significant and meaningful differences remain. Democrats are fighting to protect the health care of the American people, and we are not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of everyday Americans. Period. Full stop. There's a Republican-caused healthcare crisis that is causing hospitals and nursing homes and community-based health clinics all across the country, in rural America, urban America, small-town America, the heartland of America, and black and brown communities throughout this country. And that crisis is happening right now. And that's why we believe there is urgency to both keeping the government open, reaching a bipartisan spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people in terms of their health, their safety, their economic well-being and quality of life, while also addressing the dangerous Republican healthcare crisis.
We laid out to the president some of the consequences of what's happening in healthcare. And by his face, and by the way he looked, I think he heard about them for the first time. The closing of rural hospitals. The fact that so many clinics are closing. And I don't know if he knew this before, but the fact that people will pay $4,000.
Those comments there by Senator Chuck Schumer happening just moments ago. Now we're learning that Speaker Johnson and Vice President J.D. Vance has just stepped out of those meetings with the president. Let's listen to those comments.
You don't say the fact that you disagree about a particular tax provision is an excuse for shutting down the people's government and all the essential services that come along with it. If you look at what Chuck Schumer has said in the past consistently, it's whatever our disagreements are, let's negotiate with them, let's talk about them, let's figure out a bipartisan solution, but you don't shut the government down. In other words, you don't put a gun to the American people's head and say, unless you do exactly what Senate and House Democrats want you to do, we're going to shut down your government. That's exactly what they're proposing out there. Now, we have to remember, they're very frustrated. They say that they're very frustrated about the fact that this negotiation has not taken place until today. But if you look at the original thing they did with this negotiation, it was a $1.5 trillion spending package, basically saying to the American people, we want to give massive amounts of money, hundreds of billions of dollars to illegal aliens for their health care while Americans are struggling to pay their health care bills. That was their initial foray into this negotiation. We thought it was absurd. We told them it was absurd, and now they come in here saying that if you don't give us everything that we want, we're going to shut down the government. We think that's preposterous. We think it's totally unacceptable, and we think the American people are going to suffer because these guys won't do the right thing. Now, I want to make one final point here. You will hear a lot from Senate Democrats, from House Democrats about the fact that American health care policy is broken. Well, we know that American health care policy is broken. We've been trying to fix it for the 8 months that we've been in office, but every single thing that they accuse about being broken about American health care is policy the Democrats have supported for the past decade. So if they want to talk about how to fix American health care policy, let's do it. The Speaker would love to do it. The Senate Majority Leader would love to do it. Let's work on it together, but let's do it in the context of an open government that's providing essential services to the American people. That's all that we're proposing to do, and the fact that they refuse to do that shows how unreasonable their position is. I think we're headed to a shutdown because the Democrats won't do the right thing. I hope they change their mind, but we're going to see. I'll let the Speaker say a few words.
Thank you, Vice President Vance. I want to thank the President as well. They showed strong leadership today. They invited the 4 leaders over here because the President is operating in good faith, and he demonstrated that very well. The problem is that Chuck Schumer and Leader Jeffries refuse to acknowledge the simple facts. Let's review what the simple facts are. As the Vice President was saying, this is the common sense thing to do. This is the right thing to do. This is the simple thing to do. By way of review, the House is getting back to the way the regular appropriations process is supposed to work. 12 separate appropriations bills passed through the House Appropriations Committee, 3 off the floor. The Senate doing their work as well. All this in bipartisan fashion, by the way. They passed 3 bills in the Senate. Those bills don't match up exactly. So for the first time in years, since 2019, you have a conference committee that is being constituted between the House and the Senate. This is the way a bill becomes a law. They work out the differences. All this is happening in bipartisan fashion. The problem is we've run out of clock. September 30th is the end of the fiscal year, so we need a little more time. So what we did in the Republican majority is the right, responsible, simple thing. A clean, continuing resolution, a short-term, nonpartisan continuing resolution. It's only 24 pages in length. Leader Thune has a copy if you want to see the exhibit. There's nothing partisan in here. No policy writers, none of our big party preferences, because we want to do the right thing by the American people and allow more time for negotiation. Now, there's a reason that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have come out here, stomped the feet, saying that they can't go along with this. They're trying to bring in extraneous issues. They issued a counter proposal. You should go take a look at what they requested. $1.5 trillion in new spending that is unrelated to the ongoing appropriations process. They wanted to, as you said, restore taxpayer-funded benefits, okay? Hard-working taxpayers in America. They want to take your funds and give that for benefits to illegal aliens. They want to restore that because we got rid of it. They want to prop up left-leaning media outlets. $500 million they threw in on top of that. $1.5 trillion on a 7-week stopgap funding measure. We're not going to do that. They know we can't do that. And we never have in the past. During the Biden administration, there were 13 threatened shutdowns. The Republicans in the minority did the right thing. We kept the government open. We're simply asking for the Democrats to do the same. Again, I want to thank President Trump for the strong, solid leadership. He listened to the arguments, and they just wouldn't acknowledge the simple facts. I want to thank Vice President here for showing his leadership as well. If the Democrats make the decision to shut the government down, the consequences are on them, and I think it's absolutely tragic. We've never said that was a good idea. We never believed it is. And I want you to remember, when we voted in the House, we passed it out of the House. The House has done its job. We did that almost 2 weeks ago. Every Democrat in the House except one voted to shut the government down. That is the record, and don't forget it. I'll ask Leader Thune to step in here.
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is what we're talking about. 24 pages. It's a continuing resolution to fund the government through November the 21st. I don't know where they're saying this is some huge partisan thing. This is something we do fairly routinely. And when the Democrats had the majority on 13 different occasions, they had the majority, President Biden was in the White House, we passed continuing resolutions to fund the government. This is purely and simply hostage taking on behalf of the Democrats. The Republicans are united. House Republicans, Senate Republicans, President Trump. The House has passed a clean funding resolution to fund the government until November the 21st. It's clean, it is bipartisan, and it is short term. But it gives us enough time to finish the appropriations process, which is the way we should be funding the government. So Republicans in the House and the Senate, President united, they've passed the bill. This is sitting right now at the Senate desk. We could pick it up and pass it tonight. We could pick it up and pass it tomorrow before the government shuts down, and then we don't have a government shutdown. It is totally up to the Democrats, because right now they are the only thing standing between the American people and the government shutting down. We're all in favor of funding the government, and this is something that's been done routinely 13 different times by the Democrats when they had the majority. So it's to me, it's purely a hostage-taking exercise on the part of the Democrats. We are willing to sit down and work with them on some of the issues they want to talk about, whether it's the extension of premium tax credits with reforms. We're happy to have that conversation. But as of right now, this is a hijacking of the American people, and it's the American people who are going to pay the price.
Russ, you want to say a few words?
Sure. We want to keep this government open. It is not good for the American people to have the government shut down for any period of time. We will manage it appropriately, but it is something that can all be avoided. It can all be avoided by accepting a reasonable position, which is what the House has passed and what sits at the Senate desk, which is to continue to fund the government with a short-term continuing resolution. It has never been a viewpoint that $1.5 trillion is a reasonable amount of spending to be included on a short-term CR. This is hostage-taking. It is not something that we are going to accept, and we hope that the Democrats come back from the brink, fund this government, and allow us to move forward. Thank you.
Great.
Mr.
What's
Vice
up?
President, so just to be clear, is there room for negotiation here with Democrats? And you mentioned you believe that we are headed toward a government shutdown. Is the federal government preparing to fire federal workers if the government does indeed shut down?
Well, first of all, we have to keep essential services functioning as well as possible if the Democrats shut down the government, and Russ has been tasked with making sure that's possible. Now, you asked about negotiations. One of the things I admired about the president, but frankly the entire team's approach during the conversation we just had with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries was, they have some crazy ideas. Giving taxpayer money to illegal aliens for health care, that's a crazy idea. Funding transgender surgeries in Peru, that's a crazy idea. But they had some ideas that I actually thought were reasonable, and they had some ideas that the president thought was reasonable. What's not reasonable is to hold those ideas as leverage and to shut down the government unless we give you everything that you want. There were multiple times where Leader Jeffries or Leader Schumer would say, you know what, we should be doing this, and the President of the United States would say, yeah, absolutely, let's have that conversation, but we're going to do it in the context of the people's government being open. We're not going to let you take the people's government hostage and then give you everything that you want. And that's really the state of the negotiation. Yeah, let's have a conversation, let's have a negotiation, but we're not going to shut down the government because we won't give the Democrats everything that they want. Caitlin.
Can you respond to what Senator Schumer said, that there were aspects about health care and things for certain people that the president was learning about for the first time in that meeting? And was the president open to a deal on the ACA subsidies?
Well, I'm highly skeptical that the president was learning about it for the first time, thanks to Chuck Schumer. But what I will say is, look, we have put a $50 billion rural hospital fund into the big beautiful bill that we passed a few months ago, because we know that under Biden administration's policies, there are a lot of small town hospitals, a lot of rural health care that was getting shut down and that was struggling. We're trying to fix that problem. In fact, we're happy to work with Democrats to fix that problem. We want to work across the aisle to make sure that people have access to good health care. We are not going to let Democrats shut down the government, take a hostage unless we give them everything that they want. That's not how the people's government has ever worked. That's certainly not how it's going to work under the Trump administration.
Go ahead, please. This is very important on health care. Their counterproposal, what Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are demanding, is that they claw back the $50 billion that we put into the rural hospital support structure. They want to take that back. We're not going to do that. We passed that because we have to allow for that. Also, if they shut the government down, not only are troops unpaid, federal workers, and all the services that everybody relies upon, but the WIC program, the nutrition program, women, infant, and children, they will not get that program, will not be funded. FEMA won't be funded. We have hurricanes off the coast of the United States right now. This is serious business. You have telehealth, you have mental health services, all that's funded by the government would stop if Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats have their way. The Democrat shutdown would be damaging for the country. We can't allow for it.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Top Republican leaders there speaking to the media outside the White House after a meeting with President Trump and top Democratic leaders on how to avoid a potential government shutdown and reach some sort of agreement here. I want to bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who's live for us outside the White House. Ed, it seems like these two sides are very far apart and that a shutdown is imminent here.
Very large differences, says Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader. There are still large differences between us. Significant differences remain, says the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. The Vice President, I think we're headed to a shutdown because Democrats won't do the right thing. Folks, it all expires at midnight tomorrow night, Eastern Time, and it appears that the sides are nowhere closer to any kind of an agreement. A reminder, the House of Representatives about 10 days ago now passed a extension of government funding at the current spending levels for 7 weeks through right before Thanksgiving, as you heard the Senate Majority Leader John Thune say. Democrats are needed to support this, at least 7 of them, in the Senate, where you've got to have at least 60 votes. When we go back to this issue of 60 votes in the Senate. And right now, Democrats United are saying we're not going to support this unless we can have conversations about extending a key tax cut that is set to expire at the end of the year for millions of people who are on the Affordable Care Act. That's where you start to hear the president, the vice president, the speaker talk about Democrats want to give health care back to illegal aliens. Well, Republicans have provided no proof that any undocumented immigrant was accepting health care in a fraudulent way on that program, but it's the talking point they're using, saying how can it be that taxpayer money is going to be used to give health care to illegal aliens, as they put it. Again, no proof of that. They also point out they want to give $500 million to left-leaning news organizations. That's because Democrats are pushing to restore the $500 million in federal funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which of course pays for NPR and PBS. That's where they are at this point. They're miles apart. But what you heard Leader Schumer say is that he believes for the first time the president was made aware of some of the things that Democrats are offering, and he seemed open to potential negotiations. You also heard the Democrats say that while the president didn't walk out there to talk to reporters, it's ultimately the president who's going to decide what goes on here, because Republicans have been taking their cues from him. So that's why Democrats wanted this meeting today, was to get in front of the president and say, you're keen to make a deal. Let's do that. Let's find a way to move forward in a bipartisan way, as all spending agreements have to be in this town, so long as there is at least a handful of Democratic votes needed in the Senate. But Elizabeth, bottom line right now, doesn't look like it's going to happen before Tuesday night. There will be a partial government shutdown. Essential services, law enforcement, border security, national security, the military, air traffic control, all that will continue. It's a lot of other programs across the government that won't. Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits will get paid out. Everything else, though, is subject to the White House deciding what to do. And you saw the budget director there, Russ Vought. He'll be a key player in all this, deciding what stays open, what gets closed, as that impasse continues.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much outside the White House for us.
New York Republican Congressman Mike Lawler joins me now. Congressman, good to see you. Give me a bet from your perspective, the likelihood of a full government shutdown later this week.
Well, it's entirely up to Chuck Schumer, Major, and he seems to be barreling us right towards one. You know, this is a man who during his career has continually voted for CRs, has repeatedly lectured America about the need to keep government funded and open and the consequences of failing to do so. And yet here we are, and he is leading us down the precipice of a shutdown, which will impact not only the economy and our markets, but impact Americans who rely on the social safety net, those serving in our military, our first responders, our border security. These are quotes from Democrats for years telling everybody that this is why we can't shut down the government. And yet here they are refusing to pass the CR that House Republicans passed last week that is clean funding and keeps us open and operating through November 21st.
A CR means continuing resolution. It is what happens when Congress has not passed any appropriations bill or an insufficient number. Congressman, you know better than I do. Congress hasn't sent one appropriations bill of the 13 to President Trump's desk. Republicans own that failure. Why aren't you at least partially complicit in this?
Well, first of all, for over 30 years, Congress has not passed appropriations bills on time and individually.
I know, but I listened very carefully when you guys were campaigning for the majority that you would do it in a better, more efficient, more productive way.
Yep. And that's something that I and others continue to be working through. And it's why the Appropriations Committee has passed all 13 resolutions and appropriations packages. The Senate is working through theirs. We would like to get it done, and we would like to obviously pass all 13 individually as opposed to one big omnibus bill. But in the interim, with government funding slated to expire tomorrow, there is absolutely zero reason to allow the government to shut down. Just because we didn't pass all of the appropriations bills does not mean that you shut the government down. And Democrats have repeatedly said that. They have repeatedly voted for clean CRs when they've been in control and when they haven't been in control. The only difference here is that Donald Trump is president and Chuck Schumer is petrified of a primary from AOC. And so now he has a very different posture when it comes to keeping the government funded and open.
Where do you stand, Congressman Lawler, on extending the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act subsidies that were created in the American Rescue Plan, extended in the Inflation Reduction Act? By the numbers I've seen, if they are not extended by the end of this calendar year, on average, premiums could go up for those who would obtain the subsidies by 75%, 90% for Americans in rural parts of our country. And there might be as much as a 50% decline in marketplace enrollment. Are you okay with those stats?
Well, obviously, affordability is the #1 issue, and it's why we passed the tax bill. The average New Yorker, for instance, is going to see a $4,000 tax cut. So I'm acutely aware of the challenges with affordability. It's why I've signed on to legislation to extend the ACA subsidy that was put in place during COVID. I've signed on to legislation to extend that by a year. I am very open to negotiation on this, including the potential of an income phase out. But the fact is that this is something that will be negotiated as part of a final appropriations package. To shut the government down would seem to hurt the very people that you're trying to help. And that's where I just think this whole idea of trying to tie all of this together and tie up keeping the government funded and open is illogical and short-sighted. So, look, I support extending it. It's just a question of how it's done, and you negotiate that.
Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine said today he could vote for a clean CR, meaning a continuing resolution, if there were assurances from the White House in writing that this matter of the Obamacare subsidies would be dealt with and dealt with in a serious legislative way. What did that tell you?
Look, I think some of my Democratic colleagues are looking for an off-ramp. I think they realize that it's an untenable position to shut the government down and is not going to go well once it is shut down. And so I think they're looking for an off-ramp. If that's the off-ramp they need, I'm already on record supporting extending it. So certainly, I've been encouraging the White House to that. But again, that's going to be part of a broader negotiation on the fiscal year 26 appropes. If that's what Tim Kaine and others need, fine. But let's keep the government open and funded.
New York Republican Congressman Mike Lawler. Appreciate the time, sir. Thank you. As promised, joining me now, Illinois Democratic Congresswoman Nikki Budzinkski. Congresswoman, great to have you here. Just for your knowledge, I've been covering shutdowns in Washington since the mid-1990s, and I know as a threshold matter, reasonableness is always in the eye of the partisan beholder, okay? But the vice president just said it is unreasonable for Democrats not to allow the government to stay open while negotiations continue on health care and other matters. Why is that unreasonable?
Well, look, they've had 6 months to reach an agreement on a budget. They've been unable to do that. And what is really unreasonable is the manufactured health care crisis that Republicans are inflicting on communities that I represent in central and southern Illinois, a largely part of the rural part of America that have a lot of community health centers that are really facing very difficult decisions. When I hear from constituents on a regular basis about their increasing premium costs Healthcare is becoming unaffordable, and it's unreasonable for the Republicans to not be addressing this and to be barreling us down what looks like a path to a shutdown.
Well, how does the government shutting down, partial or in full, assist those constituents you just described? Because they're not going to get any help while the government is closed at any level.
Yeah, the government shutting down is the last thing that we want. But what we do want is, again, a seat at the table and for Republicans to acknowledge, again, the manufactured healthcare crisis that they have created, and looking at the budget as a way to actually address the tax credits that are going to be expiring from the ACA. Constituents in my district are going to get notices as soon as next month that their premiums are going to be increasing by at least $1,000. So these are things that are impacting working Americans in real time, and we feel very passionately that that should be a part of any budget negotiation, which is addressing this crisis that Republicans have created.
So based on your conversations in the Democratic cloakroom and whatever you've heard from the Democratic leadership, how does this week play out? It doesn't look like there's any off-ramp.
Well, look, I really hope that there were conversations today. It doesn't sound very optimistic that much was necessarily reached as far as negotiations go. I still hold out hope until midnight tomorrow that we'll be able to have everybody come to the table, and Republicans realize that in order to get a CR passed, they're going to need Democrats in the Senate in particular to come along on that vote. And in order to do that, we're asking for something very simple. They need to at least be looking at extending the ACA tax credits or addressing the manufactured healthcare crisis that they've created around Medicaid. Something has to give. Democrats are just not going to continue to stand idly by while this healthcare crisis is inflicted on the American people.
The vice president again said something the White House says with some frequency, which is one of the asks from congressional Democrats is to somehow reestablish federal subsidies or Medicaid allotments for those who are undocumented in our country. It's against federal law for that to happen. What I'm curious about, Congresswoman, is how much do you hear about that concern from your constituents?
What I hear about are Americans in my district, constituents I have in the 13th district, facing difficult choices between paying their grocery bill and affording prescription drugs. Rising costs due to this administration's trade wars and rises on tariffs, and that's leading directly to increased costs for consumers. Instability and uncertainty for our farmers, the crisis that they are creating. I will also say not only does the government funding expire tomorrow, but so does the Farm Bill. None of these things, these have been failures of Republican leadership. They've been able to get these things done. And what I hear from my constituents is that they want relief, they want costs to go down, and they want accessible and affordable health care.
And what signal are you looking for, Congresswoman, that the posture from the White House or Senate Republican leadership is changing? Because right now it appears very hardened and very dead set on forcing your side to capitulate, and rapidly.
Well, it's unfortunate because I would say that they need to recognize the reality that in order to get a continuing resolution or a budget deal across the finish line, they need Democrats in the Senate to get that done. Democrats are making a very simple ask of the White House and Republican leadership, which is to acknowledge and address the manufactured healthcare crisis that they have created. They own this shutdown. They have made it very clear that they are the ones that are in charge in Washington, D.C. And so Democrats are asking for the votes that they will need to get this done and addressing the healthcare crisis in this country.
Does that mean that it has to be addressed before the shutdown is ended, or do you just need some assurances that it will be subject to negotiation and resolution by the end of the year?
I think we need clear assurances. I mean, clear assurances that this is going to be addressed. And that's not what it sounds like came out of the White House today.
Congresswoman Nikki Budzinkski from Illinois, Democrat, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.